say Las Vegas data.setup. And so it's going to pretend it's in Las Vegas, and it's going to simulate me moving up the strip. So now, this time I remembered in my main page, I need to add a link to this new page. So I had another hyperlink. Go to location page, location.xaml, Control F5. Now let's go to our location page. Make this a bit bigger. So now you see my three text boxes: status, position, and address. And watch as they all kind of update. And again, this is fake data, but it's simulating what the real location service would do. So if I click Get Location, it starts initializing, and it says I've got no data. But then it's going to get some data here. 36 degrees minus 115 degrees. And you can see I'm moving up the street. It resolved it to Mandalay Bay, and then I'm moving up to the Luxor, then the Excalibur, and then this is going to keep moving up the strip, and I think it stops at Caesar's Palace. So if we could have shown this on the real device, you would have seen this happening, and if I was in a car driving, you would have seen this happening. But this is exactly the same data you would get from the real location service. So that's how easy it is on Windows Phone to get location data from a GPS or from a cell tower, and to decode it into real user-visible content. Now, one thing, I was wondering why I was so ahead on time, and I realized that these auto-forwarding slides actually auto-forwarded through a whole section. I apologize, I do not know why it's doing this. So let me just go back through all of these crazy builds. In fact, it went through a whole ton of it missed all of this. I don't know what went wrong. So I was going to talk about the back button integration, but with this mess up, I don't know if I can do that now. Essentially, the back key you've seen on the device, it lets the user go back and forth between previously viewed screens. So you've seen me demo on the emulator, going forward to a screen and then navigating back to the previous screen, going forward to a screen, back to a previous screen. And it can also go back across applications. So if I'm in application 1, then I hit start, and then I go to application 2, when I go back, I can actually go back across different applications. And the key thing is that it's not to be used for application-specific behavior. So if you're running a game, for example, and you think, hey, it'd be great if I used the back key as like my fire button in my game. So I'm controlling some guy with the accelerometer, and when I hit the back key, I want him to fire his gun. That's not a really good use of the back button, because the user expects the back button to work in a particular way, and you're violating what they expect the back button to do. But every rule has its exception. So I'm going to show you very quickly what one of the exceptions is to this rule about apps should not really use the back button. And if I switch back to my laptop, and this one I'm going to go through super quickly to try and get back in the flow of things. If I'm on my details page again, details page. Whoa, zoom that out a bit. And I'm going to add a bit more XAML here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to simulate a confirmation dialog. So I'm going to drag this in. Essentially, I have a button called delete, and then I have a fake dialog that's going to pop up and say, are you sure you want to delete, yes or no? Let's make that invisible for now. And then I'm going to add a bit of code here. And this is going to do something pretty basic. When I click the delete button, it's going to open up that confirmation dialog. So the dialog's just going to appear, and the user sees yes or no. If I click yes, I'm going to close that confirmation dialog. And of course, in a real app, I would go ahead and delete stuff. If the user hits no, I'm just going to close the dialog. And here's where the back key override comes in. So there's a virtual method on back key press you can override. And what I'm going to do is, if the confirmation dialog is open, I'm going to close it, and then I'm going to cancel the back key and say, sorry, Windows shell, I've already handled the back key. Please don't go back to the previous screen. And so this is really like the main reason why you would want to handle the back key in your application, is if you have some pop-up UI, whether it's a context menu or a kind of a dialog like this, users will expect that the back key will dismiss it. And so if we run this application now, I can show you what happens. I'm sure you can all imagine what's going to happen. If I go to my details page, if I click the delete button, my sexy dialog pops up. Now, if I hit no, it goes away. But I can also hit the back key, and it goes away. I can hit delete, back key. And now, if it's not visible, if I hit the back key, I let the system do its default behavior, and it goes back between pages. So that's the default. That's really the one exception to the rule of please don't override the back key, which is if you have kind of modal or semi-modal UI, it's OK to dismiss that when the user hits the back key. Now, I'm sure this PowerPoint has auto-forwarded again through all of my slides. So let me go back. So that was the back button. So one of the other, and now I have to kind of rewind, because this is straight after we talked about application structure and the application bar and so on. One of the other differences between writing a Silverlight web app and writing a phone app is, of course, on the phone, a lot of things can happen. There's a lot of interruptions coming in. You have things like there's supposed to be a build here. OK, you have things like phone calls coming in and text messages coming in and the lock screen coming in. And all these things affect the way that your application runs. And you don't need to deal with these things on a normal web application. So how do we deal with them on the phone? So basically, your application lifetime is very similar to what a normal application would be. You start off not running, your application starts, it's in the running state, and then you exit. And the difference is that while you're running on the phone, two things can happen. One is that you can be obscured, and we'll talk about obscurity in the next slide. And the other is that you can be paused, and we'll talk about pausing in the slide after that. And these are the ways that you deal with constant interruptions that you have on the phone. So the first is when you get obscured. And the little call out here says not in the mixed build because we don't have all of this UI in the build. But imagine that your application is running, and then something happens. A phone call comes in, or there's a reminder popping up, or the battery low dialog comes. And so really the user can't see your application anymore because there's something in the way of it. What happens is we tell your app, hey, you've been obscured. Might want to do something about that. But we keep running. We don't do anything to stop your application or to take resources away from it. It just keeps running. Then after some time, that piece of UI will go away, like the user accepts the reminder or they dismiss the battery low. We give you an unobscured notification saying, OK, you're back. Everyone can see what you're doing again. And the idea being that, for example, if you're a game, when you get the obscured event, this would be a really good time to pause the game. Because we're saying, hey, there's a big reminder in front of the game. User probably can't see what they're doing, and they're going to die if you don't stop the game. So they're going to lose their game. Not a good experience. So when you get the obscured event, that's when you would do things like pause a game. But you do keep running. So if you have, say, background music you want to play or some background animations you want to play, you go ahead and do that because your app is still running. It's just that anything that requires user interaction should be paused because the user can't interact. And of course, the opposite, on unobscured, you might choose to resume that game, or at least give the user the option to resume that game. So they're the two things that happen during obscured and unobscured when Shell UI pops up. So the next thing is, what happens if I actually jump to another application? So say my application is running, and the user does something like they click the start button to run a second application. Or they accept that incoming call and now they're talking to somebody. Or a notification comes in and they click on that notification and now they're in another app. So in this case, what happens is we send you a pause event to say, hey, pause, stop what you're doing. And we do actually suspend your application in this case. So in the previous instance of, say, reminders and so on, your application keeps running. In the case of switching to a different application, your application does actually stop. And then, assuming the user comes back to your application, we will give you a resume event saying, hey,